We're going to continue our series on family life. Our text is Ephesians chapter number 2 and verse number 19. If you'll stand, we'll just read that together. Ephesians chapter 2. Now therefore, ye are no more strangers and foreigners, but fellow citizens with the saints and of the household of God. So we are part of God's household. And of course, I was pointing out to, I think, the Monday night Bible study class, that the scripture usually describes us as saints as opposed to Christian. Now, we sometimes use that word Christian as a generic form to say we follow Christ. But you notice for the most part, the scripture calls us saints of the Most High God as opposed to Christian. Christian in the first place was really not a nice terminology, but we're talking about the household of God and saints of the Most High God. So God bless you, and you may be seated. So we're talking about family life. And it is quite important because even as the household of God, we are termed as family. And this is really the fourth part of this particular series. And the last time we were here, we were talking about, we started the subject of how marriage should work. And we had left off on our discussion of the respective roles, and we had started to talk about the role of the husband. As I made mention, the main function, the main role that the husband does play is leadership. That is his main role. And so his wife, and if there are children involved, so should submit to his leadership. This is why then that husband must know where he is leading his family to. He's got to know. It is like he is driving a vehicle, and you really ought to know where you're going. The family, of course, will not submit to his leadership if he is not trusted by them. If he does a lot of crazy things, after a while, they are going to distrust him. And nothing good is coming out of that. The husband then must be submitted to God, because the entire relationship in Scripture is based on submission. The apostle talks about submission in 1 Corinthians chapter 11. It's all about submission. So the husband has got to be submitted to God. And this is chiefly seen that he is submitted to God when he is submitted to his pastor. So if he's not submitted to his pastor, then we know for sure he's not submitted to God. And if I might say so, if he is not submitted to his pastor, it is quite unfair for him to feel that his wife should be submitted to him. It doesn't make sense. And so if he is submitted to God, i.e. his pastor, then his wife should be submitted to to him. If he is not submitted to God, then she has no obligation to be submitted to him. That's how that works. Because if he is not submitted to God, nothing good is coming out of that marriage. You look in marriage in the world and is in trouble because there is no submission to God. Because the Bible says we need to submit to God and then we can resist the devil. The husband then should lead in every area. I made mention that he is the leadership of that family unit, and so he needs to lead in every area, whether it is submission, in prayer, in giving, in church attendance, in sacrifice, whatever area, then he needs to lead in those areas. The second thing I'm going to mention is that he, as a dad, must be involved in taking full responsibility for providing for his family. Got to take full responsibility. If you pull up for me 1 Timothy chapter 5 and verse 8. 1 Timothy 5:8. But if any provide not for his own family, his own household, and especially for those of his own house, he hath denied the faith. That is, he's denied the apostolic faith, the faith of Jesus Christ, his church life. So he's denied the faith, and he is worse than an infidel, an unbeliever. Usually, when we do premarital counseling, I usually explain to the couple, and specifically the man, that ideally it is the man's income that should run that budget. Because if they get married, and suppose the family budget was based on both of their income, what if the wife gets pregnant and is out of the workforce for any length of time? What do they do then? Unless you can say, well, we saved up during the time when she was working. We have a large bank account, and then you can draw from that. But in any event, it is his responsibility to ensure that his house is properly cared for, and there's money to run it. And this is why, of course, if young men are desirous to get married, you got to know how you're going to support your wife. And then subsequently, the balance of the family. You can't just, in Florida, you simply can't just live under an oak tree. There's a lot of oak tree, but first of all, you could get struck with lightning. That is not a good place. Then it rains very heavily here. So living up under an oak tree is not a viable, practical plan that you want to play. So you got to have some money, some wherewithal. Because marriage is never just about the bedroom scene. There are other places in the house. It is up to the husband to figure out all of these things. If his wife and the kid just sit down looking in his eyes, they're simply saying, sir, you need to figure this thing out. And to me, that's reasonable. I know in our time, we're living in a time where both spouse usually work, where it's possible. And this can pose some problems. And so again, we need to figure those things out. There are sometimes the mother doesn't get enough time to spend with that young baby. And as I mentioned here before, that within the first 18 months of that baby's life, that baby will learn more than 50% of everything that that baby will know in its entire life, even if he or she lives to 100 years old. The first 18 months of their life, they will learn more than 50% of everything they will know. So that means that during those first few months of the baby's life, then the parents ought to be fully involved, particularly the mom ought to be involved in nurturing and bonding and forming some close-knit relationship with that child. So if both of them work, and they're working almost from the get-go as soon as the baby is born, pretty much, that's a problem. Because she is not getting enough time to spend with that baby. And then secondly, many times, because both of them work, then you have problem in the division of the household chores. So when the mom is at home, then she's going to do all the chores. But when both of them come in at 4 o'clock, well, you got to share those chores. There is an inclination sometimes for some husbands just to say, well, those things are they're just women's job. And so he gets the remote or a newspaper or whatever he does, and he goes into that love seat or whatever they call it these days, and he's kind of just reclining and asking her to bring a cup of lemonade, and he's just having a whale of time. Well, she's kind of just scurrying around with frayed nerves because she put in 8 hours also. So that's a problem. And he said, well, that's just a woman's work. Well, I understand both people work. So it means if both of you work, then both of you have equally to share all the household chores when you get home. And you don't have to clap, because I'm not nervous or anything. I'm just telling you. So you both have to share the chores. So if you can't iron, then you need to learn to iron. If you don't know how to use the washing machine, you got to learn it. Or you say, you do this and I do that. But both of you got to be working before you can sit down. And you may not even get enough time to sit down. That's how that goes. So it's not just a woman's job, it's your job. That's what a dad does. That's what a father, that's his function. And if the husband cannot run that household on his singular job, then he may need to get a second job. You know, principles in scriptures, we can't even change that. I'd love to tell you that I could change it, but we can't. Third thing, here's the role. I'm talking about the role of the dad. He must be a hands-on dad. He can't just be aloof. He can't just be there but not there. Can't be hanging out with his buddy. This is why a dad can't be lazy. A father cannot be lazy. He's got to have hands-on. I'm going to read you an article that appeared in the Trib late last year. It says, survey shows fathers' involvement increased since 2002. It's Dateline, it's Associated Press, Dateline, Chicago. The detached dad turning up his nose at diapering and too busy to bathe, dress, and play with the kids is mostly a myth. A big government survey suggests most American fathers say they are heavily involved in hands-on parenting, the researchers found. The nationally representative survey shows fathers' involvement has increased slightly since the government first asked in 2002, coincided with research since then that bolsters the benefits of hands-on fathering. The results are encouraging and important because others have found the more involved dads are, the better the outcomes for their children, said the researcher Joe Jones of National Center for Health Statistics, part of the Centers for Disease Control Prevention. She co-authored the report released today. More academic success, fewer behavioral problems, and healthier eating habits are just some of the ways fathers' involvement has been linked with children's well-being. The result built on volumes of research showing changes in the American family since the baby boom years and before, when women were mostly stay-at-home moms and dads were the major winners. As those roles shifted, so did the view that moms are the only nurturers. The study involved nearly 4,000 fathers aged 15 to 44 who were interviewed in person between 2006 and 2010. Key findings among the fathers living with children younger than 5. 9 in 10 bathe, diapered, help them use the toilet, or get dressed at least several times weekly. Even higher numbers played with them and ate meals with them that often. Almost 2 out of 3 read to them at least several times weekly. Among dads living with kids aged 5 to 18, more than 9 out of 10 ate meals with them at least several times weekly, talked with them about what happened during the kids' day that often. Almost 2 out of 3 help with homework several times weekly. So dad has got to be involved with the children. He can't just be standing there and just be a body in the house. He's got to be hands-on. He's got to be involved with the children. He's got to know how to change diapers. He's got to know how to bathe them. He's got to be involved. That's not just a woman's job. When both of you work, well, and even if both of you don't work, you need to know how to do those things. Because husband, that's your house. That's your home. And you must show up there, and when you do these things and do it consistently, that's how you get respect. You know, many of us men, we want respect. Respect comes out of what we do. We can't just go into the house and announce we want to be respected. Well, I want everybody in here to what good is that? I want everybody in here to respect me. Huh? Really? And if you acting like a fool, no, they're not going to respect that. You got to know how to change those diapers, bathe the baby, clean up, stay involved. And I'm telling you, you know, and maybe I'll just be a little personal for just a moment. I mean, with our 4 kids, I was involved with their raising. I'm not just going to let Sister Davy do that. I remember Benjamin, for instance, he was sick, and this was early as a little baby, just months old. And he had to have had several surgeries during those very first few months. And the chief surgeon thought he would die, that he wouldn't make it. And during all that time of tests and trials, I mean, I spent hours sleeping in the hospital overnight and just countless hours there. They had to bring his bladder up, and then I had to dilate him twice each and every day. And a matter of fact, when the Lord spoke to me to come down here, and I went to that chief surgeon, says, I want you to close that up, close up the wound now, and we're heading to Florida. I mean, he was saying, heading to Florida? Wait, no. I said, just close them up. We're heading to Florida. God is going to look after that. And it means that when you have problems, Dad has to figure some stuff out. That's his role. He's got to understand that's his role. He's not just involved to get the biggest piece of the steak. He's got to look after the problems. And within our kids, I mean, I was very much involved when they went to school. Tutor, read to them, went to the library. A matter of fact, the teachers, most of the involvement was me. I mean, Sister Davy would go some now and again, but I mean, I was there talking to those teachers. What's the problem? Well, this one having reading problem. Well, what do we got to do? Got to go to the library. Got to get books. And at one time, one of the teachers said to me, and I can't remember which school. It may have been Tampa Palms Elementary then. And I know it may have been that school on MLK. And Natalie was there, and they said to me, well, we're going to have to get a psychologist for Natalie because this is going on. I said no, and we're not getting any Ritalin. If you don't get involved, I'm just telling you, as fathers, if you don't get involved with your kids, that some of that school system will do all kinds of stuff to your children. But you got to be in that office and say, no, we're not doing that. Here's what we're going to do. You got to be hands-on. And you need to tutor. Daniela was at USF and so forth. I'm helping her tutor. And I understand not everybody can tutor your children, but you need to know if they need some help, you got to be involved in trying to get some kind of remedial help for them. You got to be involved. Those are your children. You're not just going to beget them and just leave them to become vagabond and street dwellers. You got to be hands-on. And don't be thinking, well, this is overwhelming. Friend, you married a wife. Hello. And you better learn some things. I'm just telling you, as fathers, we have got to be involved. That is our job. Then he has to be involved in disciplining and training. If you bring up for me Hebrews chapter 12 and verse 6 to 11. Hebrews chapter 12. For whom the Lord loves, he chastens and scourges every son whom he receiveth. If you endure chastening, God deals with you as with sons. For what son is he whom the Father chasteneth not? But if you be without chastisement, whereof all are partakers, then are you bastards or illegitimates and not sons. Furthermore, we've had fathers of our flesh which corrected us, and we gave them reverence. Shall we not much rather be in subjection unto the Father of spirits and live? For they verily for a few days chastened us after their own pleasure, but he for our own profit, that we might be partakers of his holiness. Now no chastening for the present seemeth to be joyous, but grievous. Nevertheless, afterward it yields the peaceable fruit of righteousness unto them which are exercised thereby. And also in Colossians chapter 3 verse 21, and also Ephesians chapter 6 and verse 4. Colossians 3:21. So fathers have to, just the same role that God plays in looking over the church, the husband have to play the same role looking over his family. Fathers, provoke not your children to anger, lest they be discouraged. And 6:4. Ephesians 6 verse 4. And he says pretty much the same thing in Ephesians 6, verse 4. And ye fathers, provoke not your children to wrath, but bring them up in the nurture and the admonition of the Lord. So he's got to be involved in the training of those children. He's not going to abuse them now. No, he's not going to abuse them. He's not going to curse them. He's not going to say some egregious thing to them. But he's not going to be their friend. You know, some parents are just delusional. I'm just your friend. Well, no, I'm not my kid's friend. I'm the parent. You know, some parent, I'm thinking now, where did you learn that you need to be your children's friend? Where, does anybody know where that came from? Wave your hand if you know. I'm their best friend. Who know where that came from? Because I know it's not the Bible. I think it's in 1 Kings chapter 2, 1, where it says that David had a son by the name of Adonijah, and the Bible said he did not at any time displease Adonijah. Well, Adonijah became just a rebel. And anytime you just your kid's friend, they're going to be a Disasterville. And fathers, they're not their friends. When that is a sit down, that's what he means. It's not friend. It's not trying to make friend with you. He's trying to displease you that you'll sit down. And then, you know, I don't know where this comes from either. Some parents allow their children to call them by their first name. I'm listening at this. You call, that's your parent, that's your mom, that's your dad. You call them by their first name? Really? Well, what's that going to do? Isn't that just going to be like brother and sister? We had one couple here, and his wife, this was mother and daughter, and they just fought like cat and dog. She was 16, and I don't know how old the mother was. But that's how, if you train your child to be like your friend, and like you are like brother and sister, they're going to treat you exactly that way. The Bible says, as the twig is bent, so is the tree going to grow. If you treat them like, that's my friend there, that's my best friend. I mean, some parents are just, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, at least if they're going to take drugs, at least take the good stuff. I mean, but this kind of drug that they're taking, this is contaminated with the flour and cornmeal. Just outrageous. I mean, they need to call you, I don't know what you're going to serve, ma'am or mom, dad, whatever, but they certainly don't need to call their parents by their first name. And maybe I'll put this in just as a word of caution. Don't ever try to somehow solve all your children's problem for them and then get involved with their battles. Because some parents, they're almost like they want to hover over their kids. They don't want any harm to come to that child. They don't want them to learn any lessons. But they got to learn lessons, elder. If you just hover over, don't let a mosquito bite them. Let the mosquito bite them. They will know, hey, anytime you see a mosquito, take care of them. Your parents, most kids are going to outlive their parents. Do you hear what I'm saying? Most children are going to live longer than their parents. How many doubt that? I'm talking on balance. So now, if you're going to die before them, you just keep looking over them. Who's going to take care of them when you die? You think you're going to ask the Lord to send you back to take care of them? And if you did, he's going to say no. So now what? So you got to let your kids learn some things. Fall off the bike, and you got to wash it off, put a Band-Aid on, and say, go again. You can't protect them from everything in life. God doesn't even do that with us. So now well, I'm greater than God. Well, yeah. Yeah, you feel like that. So you just get, and then, some parents, they go to so extreme. They go to their children, do some egregious thing at school, and then they go with the teacher and almost want to fight that teacher. Just feeling that their kids are just like angels. Well, I've got news for you. They're not angels. I say, oh yeah, my kids are angels. Please. Probably the most rough kids, they just look angel when they're around you. We got to get real. You can't fight your battle, those children battle. Let them fight that out. I got a long article here. I'm just maybe going to read just part of it. It's from the Trib. It's dated the 12th of December, or the 28th of December, 2013. It says, give your children a chance to solve their own problem. And this is a secular thing. It's written by Carolyn O'Loughlin. It says here, a new moniker, Snow Parents, refers to those who not only hover over their, like a helicopter parents, but also plow ahead to preemptively eliminate any obstructions from their children's path. These are the folks who would like to hand select their young child's classmates, or who bribe coaches for more playing time, or who encourages teachers to pay extra attention to their child at the expense of other students. For those of us who work with college students, there are tales of parents called for notes from a missed class, daily requests for lists of salad bar ingredients, and parental involvement via Skype regarding a dispute between roommates over a missing jar of peanut butter. So these are parents who it looked like they don't have anything valuable to do. So they call them snow plowing parents. They want to plow everything so that their children just go on easy street. Well, what's going to happen when those parents are not around? Because I'm not plowing anything for them. They're going to plow their own stuff. They're going to look after their own things. So if I had time, I would read it. But it's just parents who just want to rescue their poor little darlings from all of the consequences of life. And it does not work. So just get over it. Let them fall. If they fall and they break their hand, take them to the hospital and let them get back on the bike. Boy, it's awful quiet in here. Did that turn on the microphone? Lord have mercy. I'm just telling you, parents, just leave your kids alone. Let them grow. Let them face reality. Let them make mistakes and let them correct it. Forget about just trying to choreograph a life for them. Forget it. They will resent you at the end. Trust me. And so you need to let children grow. and you warn them of consequence, and you tell them, here's what you don't do, and if they do it, just turn a blind eye and say, you work it out. You simply cannot rescue them from everything. You train them, you teach them, here's what you do, and if they don't do it, let them suffer the consequence. That's how that works. You can't protect them from everything, because you're not God, and God doesn't protect us from everything. And so that that's your responsibility, to train them, to discipline them, to set boundaries, set limit, and then hold their feet to the fire. And then you have to remember, Dad, that those children, as they grow, they are watching you. You are their example. You are their model. You are their template. So if you curse their mom, if you trash their mom, if you talk bad to their mom, if you call their mom out of her name, they are watching that. You are training them. So they got to see that you love their mom and respect their mom. You sometimes, I don't know what fathers are thinking. If you're going to put those children mom down and call her all kind of names, what lesson are you trying to teach your kids? Because they are going to go and they're going to do the same thing to the next generation. So you're going to just perpetuate that. Then this I also need to mention, and boy, the time is gone. Then you need to be the protector of your child, of that house, of your family. The household should be excited when you are in town. The household should be excited when you're in the house. They shouldn't be running for cover when you come back out from out of town. They should not be petrified when you're back in the house. They should be excited. Daddy is home. So they ought to feel safe. Dad, when you're home, they ought to feel safe. And then, of course, you're a protector. And so dad has to look and ensure that mundane things like insurance for those children have been taken care of. I know when several years ago, and I think this has changed, we just couldn't afford normal insurance, and so we had to use kid care. Now, I understand that has gone way up now, but you had to protect those children, because what if they got hurt? So, and then even things like life insurance. I'm going to mention this in passing. Life insurance, parents need to know that they need to have life insurance on those children. We had life insurance when those kids were yay tall, yay born. Because I'm thinking, and really that's a misnomer. It's not really life insurance. It's really death insurance. Because if they die in a time like this, it's going to cost you anywhere from $6,000 to $10,000 to bury a body. The dad has to know that that's in place. That's his role. That's his job. He's got to think about these things. You don't want one of your, and heaven forbid, one of you, the family member, to die, and then you have to run around in the time of sorrow, run around trying to find some money to bury your loved one. No, not good. So he's got to think about all of that thing. He's got to think about that. That's his job. And then quickly, and I know the time is gone, but I don't really want to come back on it next week. The role of the wife, very quickly. You know, and some of the men say, well, you've been telling us all we have to, well, how about the wife? You know, because, you know, that's how we are. Oh, yeah, what? No, kid, give, we want to hear equal opportunity. Lord have mercy. The wife should submit to the leadership of her husband. Let us look at Ephesians. I'm going to start with Ephesians chapter 5, verse 25. Ephesians chapter 5, verse 25. Husbands, love your wives, even as Christ also loved the church and gave himself for that. I think I wanted another verse. Go to 1 Timothy, please. 1 Timothy chapter 5, verse 14. And I'm going to come back to Ephesians 5 also. I will therefore that younger women marry, bear children, guide the house, give none occasion to the adversary to speak. The main function that the wife has is one of childbearing and to guide the house. That's her main function. And you say, well, if she's not bearing children, that's fine. But if she has a household, she's the wife, then it is her job to guide the house. And the husband doesn't need to compete with whatever that entails. I mean, even simple thing as the decoration of the house, decoration of the room, what the kitchen look like, all of that. Men, I mean, you know, sometimes men just want to be involved with stuff like that. I mean, you need to relax and do other things. And you know, there's sometimes the wives has a tendency to move stuff around. Well, you know, if that happens, you always assume that the couch or the chair is over here, and then you just assume in the dark you're going to sit over there. Well, she moved it during the daytime. So there you go, right on the floor. That's her job. She does that. So just have to pick yourself up and go again. Let's look at Ephesians 5 and the very last verse, and I'm hurrying now. Just the latter parts of verse 33. Ephesians 5, verse 33. Nevertheless, let every one of you in particular so love his wife even as himself, and observe. And the wife see that she reverence or respects her husband. So she really ought to respect her husband and really pay attention to what he has to say. And when you have a good husband there, then that's a good man that you need to look after. If he's going to take care of the home and watch for the children and be a protector and so forth, that's a good thing. Then she has to help in training the children. But her primary responsibility is not in disciplining children, because generally the wife is going to be more lenient on those children and have a tendency to spoil them. I'm just telling you. And that is why you need the voice of that father or dad just to say, well, sit down and shut up. So, but she's going to help in the nurturing. And so her role as outlined in Scripture is like the role of the church. We talk about the fatherhood of God and the motherhood of the church. And she is like a mother. Then lastly, the children. Children are supposed to be submitted to their parents. Let's look at Ephesians chapter 6, and I'm going to read very quickly from verse 1. Ephesians chapter 6, verse 1. Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Verse 2. Honor thy father and thy mother, which is the first commandment with promise. So it says your days would be prolonged on the earth, that it may be well with thee and thou mayest live long on the earth. So children ought to obey their parents, and parents ought to ensure that children obey you. You should not have to talk to your child 2 or 3 times. One time should be sufficient. Do this, and that's it. And so parents must teach their children good values and enforce it. And they must never call their child and calls them some names and just say some terrible things to them. They ought to respect their parents, and parents ought to indeed hold up some high standards for them. And of course, as the children grow, then the parents really should teach the children various things. Teach them how to do household chores. I mean, get them, if you have children that's 6, 7, 8 years old, get them to do chores. You're teaching them. They're learning those things, understanding that down the road they're going to have to do that. Parents shouldn't be doing all of those things for the kids. Go over and cook for them. Do this for them. What? You're not serious, are you? Now let them, teach them to do. I remember when Benjamin and Aaron, as they grew as young boys, I taught them how to do that grass. They cut that lawn. I mean, they live in the house. They're gonna do something. Don't you all teach your kids to do things, or do you do it all for them? Man, they're in there getting food. Oh yeah, they're gonna work. Oh yes, friend. Cut that grass. Initially when they cut the grass, they probably patches left, but go over it. Make sure you take this thing. And after a while, they could do it. If you don't teach them early to cut the grass when they're teenagers, they don't want to cut it. I'm just telling you. And so that is how marriage ought to work. Now, and I understand that the time is really late, so if there's not enough time for questions, I'll end maybe just half session next week, and we'll take a lot of questions. Any quick questions? Brother Mike, you have a microphone. You got a microphone there. Put that on.
Testing.
It's on. Go ahead, Brother Mike. Go quickly.
Pastor, I'm like you. I'm old school. I come from a mom and dad that I've always had to say, yes, sir, no, sir, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am.
Yes.
Cutting the grass, it was a lot more than that. Now, we have sat here and we have listened to the role of the husband. Mm-hmm. I would like to see at some point in time where Sister Davy
comes
and talks to the women of this church of their role. Because just like
all right, son, that's far enough there. Thank you. Any other question? Any other question? Okay. And of course, there's always a time and a place for everything. And I think there are sessions wherein Sister Davy is going to talk to the ladies if they have some specific thing that they need to do. What I have outlined to you is the role that those wives need to play. And scripturally, that's their role. What I've outlined to you. You could say they're going to iron and all that. Well, those are just details. But their primary role is to, as Paul said to Timothy, is to bear children and guide the house. And if there is a support for teaching the children, well, all of that's fine. Nothing wrong with that. But that's the primary role. The primary role of the man is to lead the house. That's his role. And he leads it in all those areas that I mentioned. That's his role. And so at the end of the day, then, from a scriptural standpoint, that's how that is. And then the children's role is to obey their parents. And of course, the parents are going to teach them also to help with the various things. Now you may say, well, do we do other things? Well, of course we do other things. You say ladies have to do this? Well, yeah. Children have to do this? Well, yeah. But you have to figure out those details. You've got to figure out those little things. But I'm talking about the primary roles, and as outlined, that is the primary role. Now, sometimes, and we're living in a time now wherein there's a tendency to put a lot of pressure on our wives, say to work and to do this thing. It's not scriptural. Their role is what is outlined in Scripture. For instance, sometimes you want to force your wife to work and so forth. Which scripture are you going to use? There's no scripture for that. Are you going to? I had about four families in this church at one time that the wife felt so pressured to work and so forth, she just ended up quitting that day. She went to work and she just quit. Forget about it. I'm out of here. What is that man going to do? He has to suck it up and do whatever is necessary. That's how that works. Say, well, tell them, Pastor, they got to go back and get another job. Which scripture do we use? Give me a scripture. There's no scripture for that. And sometimes we have come to a culture that has no scriptural knowledge at all. And so we just do things because it's traditional. In this church, we're doing things because it's biblical. I have no inclination just to do stuff because it's cultural. I'm not like that. I'm a scripture person. If you can't find me scripture for it, don't bother. If you tell me that's what your mom and dad did, doesn't mean that what your mom and did was right. Because a lot of people do crazy things.